There are more Chinese Amazon sellers in the building behind me than anywhere else in the world. Come with me and I'll give you a little tour. So the location I'm recording from is a place called China New South City, and it's in Shenzhen, southern China. Now, as many of you know, Shenzhen is basically the capital of the world for Amazon sellers. Almost every major Chinese e-commerce seller is located in Shenzhen, and most of them either have offices or have had offices in China New South City. So I first heard about China South City almost 10 years ago and finally decided to make the journey out to the very edges of Shenzhen and see it firsthand. A Chinese seller had told me about it at a conference in 2017 and told me that it was basically the laboratory of every black hat tactic there is on Amazon. So if you've ever had a Chinese seller bombing you with fake reviews or ripping off your trademark, it probably has its fingerprints in the place I'm about to show you. Now, New South City is basically the largest building that you're ever going to see. It encompasses over 8 stories and stretches many city blocks. Think of it as the Pentagon, but for Amazon sellers. Now, the weird thing is that when you walk into New South City, it feels just like any other Chinese shopping mall. However, the magic is happening in the other 6 floors, which is encompassed by almost all e-commerce sellers. So one second you're in a shopping mall with rich Chinese housewives shopping overpriced Western brands, and the next you're taking an escalator to a meat factory of Chinese Amazon sellers with their boxes of every cheap, low-quality Amazon product that you can think of. And some even had their overstock products for sale right there and then.
哎，老伴，
这个可以买吗？我需要给我女儿一个礼物。So as you walk into the shopping mall-like building and you get past those first couple floors, all you see are boxes and boxes and boxes and pallets of various items being shipped into Amazon FBA. So the hallways were basically breaking every American fire safety rule and had boxes and boxes and piles of cartons occupying them. So overall, there were hundreds and maybe even thousands of different Amazon sellers based in this one single building. It included some of the largest sellers like Oki and Anchor to smaller solopreneur sellers who you've never heard of. So why were they all in this one building? Well, the Chinese government is smart and often subsidizes areas like this to encourage more growth. The Chinese government knows that if you put a bunch of related businesses together in one place, they're going to cross-pollinate and learn from one another and be stronger together. Now, yes, this meant sharing illegal tactics like how to get fake 5-star reviews and avoid paying tariffs, but it also meant sharing great service providers and tips for improving photography and reducing return rates. So whereas North American e-commerce entrepreneurs are working in silos, New South City was basically the world's largest e-commerce mastermind, operating 7 days a week for some of the largest e-commerce businesses in the world. Now you notice a couple of things as soon as you walk around for a few minutes in New South City. The first is a constant sound of tape being applied to boxes. And the second thing is that a lot of the office spaces are now empty. So you've probably heard of the ghost buildings and cities in China, and China New South City is kind of one of those examples. Now the difference is that whereas most Chinese ghost cities and buildings are the result of economic downturn, in New South City, these ghost office spaces are the result of Amazon suspension sweeps. So specifically, in 2018 and in 2021, Amazon suspended thousands of Chinese sellers. Now, most of these sellers were guilty of review fraud, and when Amazon suspended their accounts, well, basically, they also turned off these businesses. Now, one of these sellers, who had the unfortunate event of having their account nearly permanently suspended by Amazon, had the graciousness to invite me into his office and tell me a little bit about how China New South City works, and then also give me a tour of New South City. So Peter, who I'm about to introduce, had a staff of 400 people before his account was suspended, and it went down to 20 people almost overnight. So my good friend Chris and Cindy have taken us to one of Chris's former employees and Amazon sellers.
I only worked for them for a week.
And then he realized he doesn't have the Chinese work ethic and he went to working on his own.
Actually, that was kind of it. I was like, it's really boring in this area. And he's like, it's great, we can just work. That's exactly what he told me.
Yeah, you're looking for the apartment here as well, right?
Yeah. I just came here to look around.
So eventually Peter invited us into his office, and I have to say that this was Chinese hospitality and business culture at its finest. We showed up completely unannounced, and he proceeded to entertain us for the next 3 hours. He also told us absolutely everything about how his business operated and wasn't shy to ask us what our annual sales were, how much we were making in net income, and of course our thoughts on Donald Trump. So what do you do here?
Now is we in this company is sell furniture.
Furniture?
Yeah, furniture.
Like
Sofa and at least as IKEA.
IKEA.
Most product is like IKEA.
No way.
Yes.
You know the big Amazon seller O Group, Oki?
Oh yes, okay, is very near here.
Oh, they are. Because
Yes,
they
so-
sell furniture now. That's all they sell. So we chatted about different Amazon sellers, and two things popped up. First, they were all somewhere there at New South City, and second, they were all kind of fed up with Amazon.
John is another Amazon seller
Yeah.
I met on Facebook.
But this moment he did not want to do business in Amazon.
Okay.
Now she do the business in YouTube, TikTok, like Hello Boss. You know that video?
Yeah.
He do the video like Hello Boss.
Time out for a second. What is Hello Boss? Well, Hello Boss is a video that's going viral in China about a Chinese factory pitching their aluminum mobile home. And they open up every video by saying, "Hello Boss."
Hello Boss，丁是 house，萨瓦迪卡，路姆人姆，萨瓦迪卡。
Now, why is that important? Well, it's important because live streaming is the absolute trend in China right now. So live streaming, of course, is like the home shopping network, except for e-commerce. So influencers get behind the camera and they try to pitch different products. Now, in North America, live streaming has kind of become a thing with things like Amazon Live, but in China, it's on a whole different level. And remember how I told you New South City was a bit of a ghost town because of a lot of e-commerce sellers going bankrupt when they relied too much on Amazon? Well, the landlords of New South City took this into mind and repurposed a lot of their spaces and turned them into live streaming recording studios. So basically, New South City was kind of becoming a Universal Studios of Shenzhen, China, and only for live stream e-commerce sellers. Now, I was fortunate enough that one of these spaces was doing their grand opening and trying to pitch their services and studio to other e-commerce sellers. So after meeting with Peter and hearing about all the ways that Chinese sellers are more motivated, harder working, and dirtier, I headed up to tour the live streaming studio. So the host of this event, Gloria, who I'll show you in a second, was, like Peter, gracious enough to show me all around the studio and tell me all about it. Now, oddly, Gloria never really asked why this white guy was touring around in the middle of nowhere in Shenzhen on the 8th floor of China New South City. Probably because I was becoming quickly their propaganda poster boy for much of their marketing. So this entire showroom is for influencers on Amazon, TikTok, and other places. A lot of Chinese sellers primarily, so selling on Chinese platforms, but also selling on American platforms. Almost every Chinese e-commerce seller that I talk to wants to be a part of live streaming in some capacity. Now, this also brought up one of the challenges which they were having is that almost all these Chinese sellers want to do live streaming, but they don't really know how to crack the North American market because there's pretty big cultural and language barriers to doing so. In fact, it's also one of the reasons why a lot of these sellers were talking about how they wish they could find a North American partner to team up with. And if you know anything about Chinese business culture, Chinese businesses love joint ventures. So if you're listening and you want to be a face of one of these Chinese sellers, well, go to China New South City in Shenzhen. So after I finished this tour of the recording studio, I went and continued my tour of New South City and talked to a bunch of different e-commerce sellers based in the building. Now, there are definitely a few different common topics which kept coming up. The first topic was that a lot of Chinese sellers were now very leery of putting all of their eggs in the Amazon basket.
Should
你
have
不是
known.
杨木树买家，你是工厂吗？你不要在亚马逊卖吗？
不是，我是在这边做产品，
啊
老板在工厂那边，
啊。
我是在这边做产品。
So a lot of them were looking to diversify away from Amazon. Now, maybe not completely ceasing selling on Amazon, but trying to add new marketplaces. And the second trend was which marketplace these sellers kept on mentioning. Now, sellers were mentioning things like Walmart and selling on their own website, but there was one marketplace which I think every single seller mentioned at some point. Do you know which marketplace that is? You guessed it, Temu. So almost every single seller that I talked to had ambitions to sell on Temu. They saw that as where the puck was going and where the real money was to be made. Now, were these sellers skeptical about Temu and eventually jacking up their prices, kind of like what Amazon has done? Yes, but the Chinese sellers also had one kind of interesting insight, which I think a lot of us North American sellers can take away as well. So whereas a lot of North American sellers are kind of focused on building brands and long-term equity and scalable businesses which we can run for the next 100 years, I think Chinese sellers are a little bit more honest and candid with themselves, and they appreciate the fact that, you know what, it's an Amazon product, it's an Amazon brand. The long-term longevity of it maybe isn't quite as long-term as we think it is. And basically what these sellers were saying is that, when the getting's good, you take it. And this might go away tomorrow, it might go away 10 years from now, but make as much money as you can now and as quickly as you can. Now, that probably says a lot to do with maybe some of the tactics which Chinese Amazon sellers have been guilty of. So some of the more nefarious things like review fraud. However, I still think it's a worthwhile takeaway that we can kind of learn from. Amazon could go away soon. And I think we've all had a lot of disruption over the last year in our businesses because of changes that Amazon has made. So take advantage of things while you can, and don't necessarily take it for granted that it's always going to be there. If I left feeling one thing, it was probably a feeling of being dissuaded a little bit. Why? Well, I recognize that most of these businesses had way more ambition and motivation than I had as a seller. So the night prior, I was actually complaining to a couple of friends, also e-commerce sellers, about how opening up an Amazon store in Europe was just too much work that I couldn't be bothered with. And meanwhile, here these sellers were, almost every single one of them operating in dozens of different marketplaces and doing it well. So I know personally, probably I can raise my ceiling for motivation and ambition just a little bit, and probably a lot of people listening here can as well. Thank you for watching. Remember to like and subscribe, and until the next one, happy selling.